Hi everybody, Neshi here, Neshi Locatz. Welcome to Star Nations Magazine fan page. I chose this particular location to do this special chat with a good friend of mine about winter weather, survival, and living in it comfortably, and specifically about good tips for Standing Rock for those of us who will be going out there in December or January. And also possibly for those who are living out there, listening to this live feed or to the recording. But even more importantly, those of us who really want to donate to Standing Rock, to the water protectors, so that they can continue to do the work for all of us, on behalf of all of us, to save the water and to sacred sites, so that they're warm and they're safe. And so I thought a good friend of mine is visiting this weekend from Alaska, and we were sitting, talking, sharing about Standing Rock and about living in cold weather. And my good friend Pam Nelson, has lived in cold weather. She has camped in winter weather, severe winter weather, I might add. She has lived in Alaska for over 30 years, in the Yukon at one point, I believe. And so I thought, what a grand idea to be able to share the kind of information that she was sharing with me with all of you. Because even if you're not going to Standing Rock in the middle of winter, we live in Wisconsin, most of my friends do, are very cold weather, and it's always good information just to have, because most of us don't do much recreating or living out in the extreme weather much anymore anyway. When we were kids, we spent a lot of time out there, but as adults, and as we call them, the industrial human, we don't spend a lot of time out there. So this is really good information to share and to use if you decide to go out to Standing Rock. So I am going to introduce you to my good friend Pam Nelson. Here she is.
Hi.
Hi. And how Pam and I know each other is actually through a training that we did together with Drunvalo Melchizedek. When Drunvalo was doing the teaching for Awakening the Illuminated Heart, and how Pam and I met was in the teacher training for that particular method of ascension. And so we remained friends, and so she said, I want to come and visit. And I said, sure, come on down. And so here she is. And here is some information about the cold weather, winter weather, living and to survive safely, right? So Pam, one of the things that we talked about was, why is there such a need for this kind of information? You were telling me about wind chill and that kind of stuff. So why is that important?
Right. Well, it's important for everyone, but particularly if there's people who are spending most of the day or long periods of time outside, it's really important not to get too cold and to get wet and then to get cold, because as soon as you start getting wet, your temperature just goes down quickly. And in areas like North Dakota where it's windy, that wind chill brings the temperature down way far below what the thermometer shows. So for instance, I looked this up today, and at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which isn't really that cold, if you just have a 15-mile-an-hour wind, it is a wind chill temperature of -19. And at those temperatures, it said that skin freezes exposed at about 30 minutes. So wind is pretty common in the Dakotas,
Yes.
and it's important to recognize that if a person is going to be really out all day in it, or for periods of time. So we were just talking and looking up ways to just live outside, and so the first thing that we talked about was primarily the layers of clothing, and it's just important to be able to take off layers if you get too hot and put on layers if you get too cold. And again, that's so that you don't overheat and start sweating. Sweating will make you wet, and as soon as you're wet, your temperature starts dropping.
Mm-hmm. And so when we think about the water protectors out in North Dakota, and they're living in winter camps, winter tents, some in teepees. There might be 1 or 2 RVs, but probably not many. and they'll be outside. They'll be cutting wood or hauling water, or even going from one camp to another, going from, let's say, their campsite to one of the kitchens to go eat. So they'll be out in the elements, much less doing some direct frontline work, right? So anyway, this is why we Pam and I had this conversation, is how could we, when we live a rather far distance from Standing Rock, in Alaska and Wisconsin, how can we best be helpful? And when Pam was sharing with me her background in winter living and comfortably living in really cold conditions, and I thought, we should get this information out. This is one way that we can actually be helpful from where we're at. And we wanted to include you in that because the information you're about to receive, we're going to give you some sources, that if you wanted to donate certain apparel, winter apparel, to the water protectors, you could do that, okay? So with that, we're going to start from the inside out. Anybody who's done drum making with me knows that we do the work from the inside out. So let's start with the inside layer, the very first layer next to your skin when we're talking about getting dressed to be outside.
Yes. So first of all, I do want to say that the two main ways that I spent a lot of time outdoors was one, very active, where you're skiing or you're running or you're sweating, and then the other way that I spent a lot of time outdoors was running dogs, where you're standing for hours and hours, possibly in really windy conditions. And so both of those are important, but sometimes take different layers. And so if you're a really active person who might be running or sweating, chopping wood, doing things that are going to take a lot of exercise and heating up of the body, it's really important to have a base layer that wicks moisture away from the skin. And now it seems, we did a little research this morning, and a lot of the really good base layers, the long underwears, are made out of combinations of merino wool and synthetic fabrics. And the wool traps the air, but it wicks the moisture away. So you can leave those types of long underwear on longer, and they don't collect the smell, the odor, and they get that moisture away from your skin. So we're going to have links below that are some areas or some companies that you can get some of these things from, but we did find almost everything on Amazon. So if you do searching for wicking underwear or cold weather long underwear, cold weather clothing, you can find a lot of it right on Amazon. So we'll put that below.
Yeah, and we did the search by using merino wool, smart wool, wasn't it?
So on Amazon, what I did was put in, for instance, wool pants, men's outdoor. And there I even found the long underwear, the pants, and everything. If you just do general searches for wool outdoor clothing, you're going to get the heavier duty clothing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
On Amazon.
Yeah, but you want to remember the term smart wool.
Smart wool is an awesome combination of comfortable soft wool. It's in socks, it's in glove liners, it's in shirts and long underwear. If you can get smart wool, you will have a much more comfortable experience.
Definitely. All right, so when we're talking about how to best dress to be outside for long periods of time in cold weather, we start with the inside layer, and you were talking about that wool blend, right?
So if you can get a wool blend, a merino wool blend for long johns, for socks, and for gloves, that's all the liners, those are all the things that would be next to your skin. Mm-hmm. And those would be the best for both odor control and moisture wicking and warmth.
Okay. And so in about how many pair do you think would be reasonable to have in a situation like at Standing Rock?
I'm not sure about the laundry facilities and how how the drying will work, if they'll have drying tents. Mm-hmm. But if you're talking about gloves, I would think everyone would need at least two, one to hang up and dry and one to wear. If
Mhm.
you're talking about socks, 3 or 4 would probably be a really nice minimum. If you're talking about the long underwear itself, most people would probably have 2, so they could take one off
And keep
and
one.
wear one.
Okay. And we're talking tops and bottoms.
Right, tops and bottoms, yeah.
Okay.
And that would go under your clothing. So if you have all wool, if you have the wool long underwear, and then the next layer was wool shirts, light wool shirts, heavy wool shirts, wool pants, those would all go over the long underwear.
Okay. All right. So there's at least 2 layers then.
Right.
All right. And then, so what is the outside layer?
The outside layer in North Dakota would be really important to be windproof, or wind resistant, but not waterproof.
Mhm.
If you have waterproof clothing like rain gear, what you have is sweat buildup inside, and so you just get wetter and wetter. So even the outer layer needs to be more of a water resistant or windproof type
Mhm.
layer material.
Okay. So it would be, what kind of material is that? That would be like I was going to say polyester, but that's not right.
No, it would be, I mean, you would, if you were, it's usually more of a, not canvas, but a very solid fabric.
Okay.
And so, I can't even think
Like
of the
duck
name
cloth.
right now, but
Yeah.
if you just look up windproof, or if you're on Amazon and you're looking at the wool pants, they had a windproof pant right next to it. It's
Okay.
It's just a cover.
Okay. Which is nice about Amazon because they always tell you if this person bought that, then they also bought this. And,
Right.
you know, and that's probably where they had that windproof pant.
So, for instance, yeah, it was right next to the wool pants, the Woolrich Men's Malone wool pant or bib, and then they had the windproof pant next to it.
Yeah. And so I know that some people will want to know about what is a reasonable amount to pay for some items.
Well, on Amazon, the wool pants, I believe, were about, I think they're 150, something like that.
Did you say 150?
125 to 150, yes.
Okay.
And that's a good thick wool pant. It's not a thin wool pant. It's like the lumberjack wool pants or the camping wool pants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those last a really long time.
Those are kind of lifelong. All you could do is wear them so much you might wear a hole in them someday, but they last for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm. And that's not something that you wash like a pair of jeans.
No, you would wash it in cool water or possibly very lukewarm water.
Mm-hmm. And you don't have to wash very often, I would think.
Not if you're keeping dry and you're not just getting mud or things on them. I mean, if you're just in outdoor winter weather, we would wear them all winter. You wouldn't be washing them a lot because snow is usually pretty clean.
Usually. It's not New York City snow.
Right.
Okay. And
They do,
yeah.
wool takes a little longer to dry. So if you're in a wet situation, you don't want to get wet if you can help it. But if you do get wet, you stay warm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So we have to talk a little bit about something, footwear, because Ken and I, we had quite a conversation about this one, about boots. And I learned a heck of a lot about boots in a really short period of time. I always thought that, that you had those kind of boots that have the felt liner. That was the best boot to have and warm. And it's not to say that it's bad. It's just that there's something better and also other things about that particular boot that I didn't know about. So, Pam, why don't you tell me about the pack boot?
Right, and the pack boot is great, particularly if you are wearing them for short periods of time or you're being able to go into a warm area and dry out the liners, but the liners can get wet, especially if you're in deep snow or if you get into water for some reason. So if you're going to have pack boots or if you're going to donate those kind of things, you actually need to donate extra liners, 2-3 pairs per boot, so that there's a drying tent or something where these liners are going to be hanging up on clothespins and just drying out over wood stoves. To avoid that, it's not a beautiful boot, but the bunny boot is what we would wear up in Alaska if we're doing a lot of outdoor traveling, because there's no liner and you just it is a waterproof boot to a certain extent, but when you take your feet out and put on dry socks, the boot is still warm. And it has a airlock on it if you want to use it that way, but it's an incredible boot if you're ever stranded, if you need to be outside for long periods of time, and it requires no liners.
Okay. And that is Bunny, Bunny
Right.
boot.
And I did see that you could also, I'm guessing this is another version. It's called the Mickey Mouse boot because it has the really big, you look like you have Mickey Mouse feet. And they're just phenomenal boots, especially for those who are going to be standing outside and just standing for hours and hours and hours, as well as walking. But you can't really run in them, so it's not for runners. But it's an incredible boot for staying warm.
Oh, good. All right. So, if you can imagine being outside, for those of us that have been to Standing Rock, and you're outside for ceremony, or if you're a front line person and you're standing on the front line in prayer and you're not moving around a lot, you really do need to be able to stay warm and comfortable, and those boots really would help.
And of course, you're going to get wet. If you're for some reason going to end up in water, or you're going to get water in your boots for some reason, or it's melted snow, you will still be warm.
Okay. All right.
You just have to drain the water out.
All right. So the thing is that you mentioned something that I want to ask about. You said a drying tent.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is a drying tent?
Well, I've read that there are midwife tents and lots of different kinds of tents. If you were going to have a cabin in Alaska, you would have twine or something hanging around your wood stove with clothespins, and so you'd come in and you'd hang your socks and your liners and your gloves and everything from there.
Mm-hmm.
With that many people, I don't know if there'd be enough room around every wood stove, and so there might be at some point a need for putting up one of the tents that has heat in it, and just clotheslines everywhere where people can bring things in to dry.
Okay.
Or a drying area of some sort somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good tip. A good tip. And one of the things that I want to do with this live, once it gets recorded, I'm going to share it with the Oceti-Sakowin people, so that those who are coordinating the winterization. The winterization, that it might be something that they haven't thought of, or they have thought of it, and so they can let people know that where it is and how it's going to be available. So I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we had.
We talked about snow machine pants and jackets, because those are common, and so those are good wind. Those are really good wind resistant things too. We didn't even talk about the most outer layer, which of course is going to be like a winter jacket or something with good insulation, which can be down or wool. Down doesn't work if you're going to get wet, of course, but wool or synthetic polyester type things. But there is an outdoor component to just winter coats that most people are going to have. And also hats, wool hats. Everybody should have their head covered.
And why is that?
Again, because you do lose not the huge amounts I've read that they often used to say, but 5 to 10% of your heat can be lost out of your head, and you just need to keep that covered.
Okay. All right. So wool hat, outer jacket that is a synthetic and wind resistant, right? And then you have a wool shirt and pant. And then next to your skin is a wool blend.
A merino wool. Usually.
Merino wool blend. What did we say? Smart wool.
Smart wool is for one of the brands is Smart wool for socks especially.
Okay, so that's a brand, Smart wool, and so that's what you want next to your skin. Okay, so what else do we need to know?
Well, I'm looking at my list here. We're going to put a list up of a lot of the sites. I was surprised to see how many things could be gotten from Amazon, so that's great. And really, I think we covered. Oh, no, there was one very important item for outhouses.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
For anyone who has lived with outhouses in the winter, the most amazing solution is 2-inch either blue or pink foam. that you cut to fit the toilet seat so that when you sit down, you sit right on that foam, and it's having an instant hot seat. It's awesome.
So the porta potties at Standing Rock are not heated, of course. And so the kind of foam that Pam is talking about is that you can get it in sheets, right? And they can be cut to size to fit the toilet seat. And you know, you could put your name on it, and that'll be your personal toilet seat cover.
Or you just leave them there.
Or you just leave them
That's
there.
how we do it.
Okay. All right. So you said 2 inches?
A 2-inch pink or blue, it's an insulating foam is what it is, and 2-inch blue or pink is going to be the highest density, so it's going to break, it's going to be the hardiest. And I was thinking if companies were donating that, it could be damaged, it could be broken, it could be pieces, because that, you know, may no longer be good for building houses, but it can be cut up into small sections and would really make a big difference.
You know, and that is something that we never even considered. Is, you know, when you think about using a porta potty outdoors in December, January, it's cold, and you know, and to take down your lower garments, you know, your pants and stuff, it's cold. And so Pam was sharing with me. She goes, well, you know, up in Alaska, you use foam, and I'm going, what kind of foam? And you don't want to use craft foam. That's not it. Or, you know, the 1 inch, that'd be too easily broken. And so she was saying 2 inches. So I had to get on the internet and look. It is a way to be able to get the foam and to cut it to size. And so that is a huge tip that, you know, I would make a guess, not many people have thought about that.
Well, I can tell you that every day you will be so grateful for that one tip, because it just makes life so much more comfortable.
It's the little things, right?
Yes.
It's the little things. All right, so Pam, is there anything else that you wanted to add to this?
No, I think it's just, you know, to look up the links and just get an understanding of what it means to layer. There's some great resources that we'll put up links for. And to become familiar with the symptoms of hypothermia and the treatment of hypothermia, because if someone does start getting too cold, and that wind is such, I mean, it's so easy to get hypothermic in wind. And so to recognize the symptoms and to know the correct way to treat it, or to get someone to medical help, because if you treat someone incorrectly with hypothermia, you can even do more damage. So to just become familiar with what hypothermia is.
Okay. All right. Now, and I'm going to add something here that we didn't add at the beginning, and that is that Pam grew up in South Dakota. And so she is very familiar with the wind that comes sweeping down the plain in the Dakotas, and then taken her life up to Alaska, where she spent some time living in the Yukon and running dog sleds and that kind of thing.
And
so,
even farther north in Kotzebue, which is the northwest coast, where there are no trees and it's just wind. So that was my real wind training.
yeah. So, you know, we have somebody here who hasn't just read about it, she's lived it. And when we were talking about winter weather and the gear that's needed in Standing Rock, I realized immediately that this lady is an expert in living in winter weather, and had something to share, so that who's ever going to Standing Rock in the middle of winter, those who are living at Osage-Sacoan Sacred Rock, Sacred Stone Campground, or even the Red Warrior campgrounds, information that is really vital to your safety. And to have this kind of information, not to say that they haven't thought about this stuff, but just to make sure that we shared it, and not assuming that they have the information. Because if they do, that's great, and if they don't, hey, we really just made a contribution, right?
And I just appreciate everything everyone's doing. And everyone can't be there, I know that, but our hearts are there.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times, you know, I say that everything about me is there except my physical body, and so I have to get grounded, and I have to, bring back my consciousness to where I'm at right here at home, and getting the magazine out and doing radio shows and taking care of my mom and, oh my gosh, doing laundry. Come on. You got to remember that stuff, right? All right, so I'm going to close this out in just a second. I just want to make sure that Pam has covered everything that she wanted to cover for you. Yeah, you think you got it all?
I think so.
Okay, good. All right, and we are going to post those links for you. Of course, we found out that Amazon has just about everything, but there's other places that are a possibility, and we're gonna list those. And if you have a contact to sporting goods stores or other industries like that might sell bunny boots, that sell the outdoor weather clothing, military style, like military surplus stores. If you have a contact with that, it would be great if you could maybe arrange donations to be sent to Standing Rock for that. And also please remember that there are some big guys, big people there that wear 2 extra large, 3 extra large, and have size 11 or larger foot. And so just to make sure that we also add those sizes to our list of things going out there. So with that, I appreciate you joining and listening to the recording of this. It's something that I think that we can all appreciate and take away something from. If nothing else, the foam seat on the porta potty. And if you have any questions, just list them in the comment section, and we will try to answer them for you as best we can, okay? And thanks a lot, you guys. We'll see you again soon, okay? Bye, Mamina, until we see each other again.